Welcome CSC 235 class to ex13-slideshow, and I'm just going to give you a quick little overview of the finished product, and then we'll start coding it. And I have a folder here. I'm working in Atom. This is a folder called Slideshow Fin, so this one's already finished. You're just going to have one that's called ex13-slideshow, but I just wanted to show you the finished product. I'm working in Atom, and if I open this up, this is what you're going to have. You're going to have basically a folder and then 3 files, and we're going to keep our JavaScript, our CSS, and our HTML completely separate. And then there's also a folder with images, and there's 6 images in there, and they actually start with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just as our index number would work when they're in an array. So I kind of name them as they would be in an array. It just made it a little bit easier starting with 0, since everything else we seem to do in JavaScript starts with 0. So our images start with 0 too. So there's 6 images. If I look at these, you can see this is from a campus slideshow that was an old version of Campus Racket. And this is the front of the building. This is one of our students, and there's different student pictures in here. And that's it. So there's 6 images in here. So that's what's inside of that folder, that images folder. And you can see they're all called AC0, AC1, and they're going to be in a folder called IMG, so you're going to have to know that path. So those are the images, and then there's an index file in here. That's our one HTML file. And I'll just open it up and show you what it does first, because that'll kind of make sense. And I'm in Atom, so I can go open in browser, whereas if you're in brackets, you would use the preview button. And it's not very fancy. It's just a white background, generic kind of default type, pics around campus, and then a little paragraph that says enjoy the slideshow. It even says there's 6 images, and it has these forward and backward buttons. And there's nothing special about the buttons. They basically just have the word next and back on them, and they have little arrows on them, just little bracket arrows. And I just want to point that out is we can't put bracket arrows as just text. We have to use a symbol because it gets confused thinking it's HTML. So you'll see that in the code. But just basic little buttons, just button elements in JavaScript, and basically you just click next and it goes to the end. And when it gets to the end, it just stops adding, and it stops kind of showing further images, and then you have to go back. It doesn't disable the button or anything like that. So it just goes forward and back. And I just want to show something here. I'm gonna right click, and I'm gonna use inspect, and I'm gonna go to my console over here, and I'm gonna refresh this because you can see there's some information there. And the first thing that shows up in the console is the image file, image/AC0. So that's the image here, and it's also showing 0, which is the index number. So it's just kind of a way for me to test out how things are working. We're going to put this in to test it and to see where we have problems, but then eventually you don't have to have that in there because you would only see it when you go into the console. But as I go through here, if I hit next, I can see it's showing that's AC1 with an index number of 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5, and then it doesn't do anything else. And if I go back, it should just go back, and then it doesn't do anything else. And I point that out because I was getting error messages in here because it kept trying to add different index numbers in here to try and increase it. Now basically the process of this is going to be when we hit the next button, it's going to run a function, and it's basically going to add to the index number, and it's going to show an image from an array, and it's going to keep increasing the index number, and as we go down, it's going to decrease the index number. So it's going to increment and decrement the index numbers as it shows an image from an array. So we're going to make an array, and then we're going to basically show images from that kind of go up and down. So we're going to have to make a variable that equals the index number that we could kind of go up and down. So that's what's going to happen. I'll just look at my code real quick. This is the index page again. We're going to have 2 links inside our index HTML, one to the CSS file, which is just how it looks, and there's not a lot of CSS in there. And then another one to the JavaScript, and notice it's at the bottom of the page. Normally it can be right here in the head tag, but it got moved to the bottom of the page, and we'll see why, because there's an issue where if the JavaScript runs first, if some of the images aren't loaded yet, it's going to have a problem and it won't recognize them. So we can actually move the JavaScript to run later in the page or at the end of the page after everything else is loaded. So that will help us kind of fix some errors. So that's why we're going to debug a little through this as well. And also what's here is basically 2 buttons, a div that basically has our picture, and then just an area that shows our picture. Here's an image with an ID of SSPic that shows our first image, which is AC0, and then it's going to kind of move from there. So that's all we really have. H1 paragraph, a div that our pictures is showing, and then a little div area with our buttons. So if we go back and look at that again, that's all we have. Here's our H1. We have a paragraph. We have a div where our image element is going to be showing, and then just 2 buttons, and that's it. So there's not a lot of HTML on here, but there's a little more JavaScript, and we're going to have to think things through a little bit, and we're going to debug a little bit when we do this. So to get started, you're going to download a folder, and that's what you're going to do next, because the one I have in here is finished, and that wouldn't be fair if you're already working on the one that's finished. So I'm going to close this up. I'll close up the file. Notice in Atom, when it's italic, it's not really open. It's almost kind of previewing it, and I'm going to close this up. And the nice thing again about Atom is you could add multiple folders here. They call them projects. So what I'm going to do is I'll do this first, and then I'll stop this video, and then we'll start coding on the next one. If I go to e-learning for CSC 235, I'm going to go to coursework. Okay, when I scroll down here, I'm going to look for unit 12. Even though it's exercise 13, it's only under unit 12. So there it is, and I'll click on the link. And there is a folder to download. So I'm going to download this folder called ex13-slideshow-Zip. So I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to save link as, and whatever the best way you do this on Windows or Mac. But for my Spring 2017 235, I have a little folder here called working folders where I work on the ones when I record them. So I'm going to put that in here, and I'll save that in there right now. And then on a Mac, I can just double click to unzip it. And I want to get rid of, and it's unzipped now because I double clicked on it, and I want to get rid of the zip one because I may rezip it when I'm done. So let me get rid of this, and I'll just trash it, and it's in the trash if I need it. And again, I'm going to have my images, I'm going to have my index, slideshow, and CSS, and most of the work you're going to be doing in the JS file. That's the JavaScript file. It's a text file, so it's not a whole lot different than our other files. But that's what we're going to be working on next, and I'll get started with that. Before I finish up here, one last thing I'll do in Atom, and whether you're doing it brackets or Atom, I'm going to do File, Add Project Folder, and that folder that I just downloaded, I'm just going to go find that. I'll go into my notes, working folders, wherever you keep these, and I'll use the one that's called Slideshow. And that's the one I'm going to be working on. And if you see a DS store in here, you could right click and you can delete that. You don't have to keep that in the folder because it might just, it's just another thing to worry about. So you have your index, HTML, your JavaScript file, and a thing called ss.css. And I'll show you that as we work on that because that's done already. So there's not a whole lot to do there. So we'll pick it up with part 2, which is actually getting started with the code.